and on and on.
That'd be interesting. I'm gonna go to that.
Mr. Chair,
All right. I'll call the Planning Board and Zoning Commission meeting for January 28th to order. Can I have a roll call, please, Greg?
Roberts,
here.
Gray, Tukin,
Here.
Ecklesdale, Boise,
Here.
Conley,
Here,
Di Benedetto,
Here. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
I move to approve the minutes of January 14th.
A second, sorry.
Is there any discussion, corrections?
No.
Have a call for the vote, Greg?
Roberts,
Yes.
Tukin,
Yes.
Boise,
Yes.
Conley,
Yes.
Di Benedetto,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, John is joined.
All right. Communication from Board Council, Urban Renewal Agency update. Agency hasn't met, this month. I think the next meeting is February, second Monday in February, I believe. Don't have anything new to report. City Council?
We did have a large meeting at Elks Club yesterday, specifically getting a presentation from Red Lodge Ice on their request with Lions Park, as well as some other investigating they've done into the 5 acres on the top of the hill at Highway 78. I do know that that is one thing that we'll be wanting to review during our zoning, because it's still currently zoned as P1A. So just something for consideration, that that might be a request. It's either we could go residential with that and do high density, because there's been conversation about making it affordable housing, or there's a conversation of, do we want to make it an ice skating rink? So there's a couple of different options there, things to keep in mind. I have a feeling that our next meeting with land use and planning, we're going to be putting together essentially a list of requests, and there is a possibility that we're going to request that Red Lodge Ice does a presentation here, just because of that zoning change, but that is yet to be decided at this point, so.
So is that zoning change likely to happen soon, or?
It would likely be happening during this process. It was something that the council did request that we review while we're reviewing zoning, so.
Is it likely to happen before we get through the whole process, or sometime in the middle?
I don't have a good answer for that yet. Probably sometime depending on how we start cranking away, it could be towards the end of it, but I don't imagine it going quickly. But that being said, I say that, and then before you know it, it's already December of 26.
Well, first off, they have to determine whether they're the location.
Mm-hmm.
And once they determine, and that's probably another month out,
At least.
at least.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, is that will potentially be one of the deciding factors, is if planning board recommends it's park space or residential space. Because that's one thing in land use and planning, is we're gonna be requesting that there's essentially letters of recommendation from the different boards and staff. Yeah.
Would it be appropriate if the Workforce Housing Committee were to put in an opinion?
I think so. And again, I think that, so again, our next meeting with land use and planning is going to be kind of going through a list and putting together who we want to have input from.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably going to be on that list.
Okay, because we did have, I'm not a member, but I do go to the meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some concern expressed today about, we really had been looking forward for that to be something that could be incorporated, but now they're like
Yeah,
concerned.
that's fair. And again, I would think that that would be a very valid, voice to have at the table.
Okay.
And again, I'll keep you guys more in the loop as we actually have a loop to keep you informed on. Right now, it's just putting together pieces of what we need. So I'm not in any position to say we're even close to ready to make a decision.
So who's going to do the evaluation in terms of whether to keep it at Lions Park or move it to Brewery Hill? Is that Red Lodge Ice, or is that, I mean, those two alternatives were presented, so
Yep.
at what point, who and what entity is going to make that decision, and what's the timeline for determining one site versus the other?
I'm not sure what the timeline would be. We obviously want that to be sooner than later, but by no means in the next two meetings. And I think what it's gonna be is, from what I have heard from Red Lodge Ice, is they don't have a preference. I think they have a preference, but they would be content with having either options. And I think from council, we're asking them to present two options for us.
City council has the ultimate decision on the use of city-owned land.
Yeah.
So that's where,
Well, I understand that, but at some point, if people decide to, or Red Lodge Ice decides to go to Brewery Hill or select that option, then at some point, that's going to be a recommendation to change the zoning to public parks or whatever that the appropriate zoning is.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to understand that who initiates that process.
The request.
Is it Red Lodge Ice? Is it the steering committee that's in charge of the grant application? Or it's kind of confusing in terms of where this whole process is relative to.
You guys.
I'm waiting for my turn, but I'm happy to jump in if you'd like.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So you had already mentioned that council had made a request to make a recommendation for what that land becomes. It is currently P1A, which is airport. I have a request into the planners to make a recommendation. My understanding from feedback from Greg is going to be, what we can do is tell you what uses would be good there, but they're probably remiss to say, here's what our recommendation is, or here's what you can do. They can give us some logic about these are the sort of things that go, and I'm thinking of the conversation we had when we were looking outside of town when Jeremy gave us some oversight about, generally if you've got a construction, then you do higher density, lower density. There was kind of there's Plano's model. So I expect we'll get that information. My understanding is, like I said, they kind of came in saying, here's a couple of different options. My best understanding, and they have requested to be on the Parks Board meeting next week, and they're going to go in front of the Parks Board to make their request. I don't know how it's listed. It's just discussion of the alternate site is how they have it on the Parks Board. I think they have a couple goals coming out of that. Is one of them is for Parks Board to make a recommendation to Planning Board that we'd like you guys to look at it for this. Also mentioned, we ought to have the workforce housing folks. I called and spoke with Brad yesterday on this, so they were aware of it as it was coming out. But I think ultimately, I think both of those groups making a presentation to the Planning Board before Planning Board makes a recommendation is appropriate. As far as timing, just some clarity, so that the RFP that is out right now is a tourism, what's the word I'm looking for, assets summary and kind of what's there. This is not the RFP where somebody is going to be engineering and designing a facility. So they don't necessarily have to know what the location is. And that, think about what, the university did for us on urban renewal, where they kind of came in and did an inventory. That's what's next coming up there is an RFP study. The RFP is for basically an inventory study of assets. It is my understanding that the current thinking from that group is they are inclined to make the request to have that be up at the top of the hill. In order for that to happen, there are two things that have to happen. It has to be rezoned. That would presumably originate in this board. Council is who signs off on it. And then they'd have to have the approval to do that. I think they are looking at, when they were talking about Lions Park and just doing a leveling, they were looking at a process that gave them the ability for this year's construction season to do that. I think if they go up there and they're starting with a clean slate, they are looking at next year, so the urgency of we have to do this yesterday is not there. I think it's been a standing request for this board to kind of look at it from a zoning thing, and I think we're getting additional information as we get closer. And I think part of their logic was just, if we go into Lions Park, even if we have, council's approval and council sign off on this, this is going to be a reoccurring battle every time something comes up. And while it may be a minority or, it's a very, and I think part of it was, we'd almost rather not have to fight that battle repeatedly, and going up top seems like it will solve those problems. So the time frame is, they have not yet come to, they just presented their ideas and what they were thinking about last night. We tried to do a little bit of a straw poll last night. Council indicated they wanted to kind of look at or consider some different sites information. I think they're going to go present their alternative thing to Parks, just so Parks give them, but like I said, ultimately, this is going to come to council at a minimum of 2 more times, and I think more than 2 more times, and specifically because zoning plays into that. So I would like to see through this process, probably in the next 2 or 3 months, solidify that so that they have something to work with, and know if they're back to Plan A or if Plan B goes. But there is no short, fast-burning fuse, to the best of my knowledge. They are looking at construction, if it were to be up there, being something next year, not next, meaning 27, not a 26 building.
Okay, yeah, that helps a lot.
Okay.
Sorry, all stuff I didn't know.
What's that?
All stuff I didn't have. All information I did not have, so.
Anything else, Mayor?
Nope, I think that was kind of it, so.
All right.
And it just felt like when you were asking the question, this felt like this is one that I ought to offer the input of all the developments that have happened
In 24
and
hours.
timelines that have happened since yesterday, and additional conversations that not, so.
Well, there was a third site mentioned yesterday that council is also asking to look at, right?
Yeah, it's not a city-owned asset.
That's
so-
the Browns Field, right?
Yeah.
Parking lot and the brownfield.
Yeah, so that's coordinating with the school district?
Well, it's not even a coordinating, it's them coordinating. The city's almost not involved at that point. And now I would argue that at that point you have a similar problem for comparison. We had looked at, the city is looking at some tennis courts that were up there, and at one point in time, we were looking at adding that to the high school lease so that they would be responsible for maintenance. And the input from staff, which I very much agree with, was if this is going to be their property, we ought not to be putting city tax dollars. And, we gave them the lease to build a football field. We didn't help pay for the football field. And so I think that's going to stay. And so, but that same conversation has implications on this conversation as well.
Okay,
on that specific side anyway.
okay. All right, there's no new business. Any public comment from online?
Mr. Chair, I see one additional participant online. I do not see any raised hands and nothing in the chat window.
All right, so we'll move
I
on.
guess if you want to formally ask for it, maybe because you just asked me if it was there, but maybe they don't know you're asking for public comment.
Is there any public comment from anybody online?
Now I can say there is no reaction to that question.
All right, and there's nobody in the room other than us, so moving on to old business, continuing to review the 2025-2026 zoning regulation update. Turn it over to Greg and Jeremy.
I think we ended on accessory uses. We got through the first pass on the land use table, table 1, and I think we're at table 2, accessory land uses by district. So I spent a few hours over the last couple of weeks going through and adding some of my own notes and suggestions through these next 2 tables, as well as into the district standard sections. So hopefully as we go through this, it'll help spur conversation and discussion. With this accessory land use by district table, we had outdoor storage that was moved from up above previously. And then I went just based on what's in your current zoning regulations, I added in the home occupations, accessory structures, which are sheds and garages, and those types of structures, and then accessory dwelling unit. So, on outdoor storage, I guess we could start with outdoor storage. So right now we just have it listed as conditional in C3N. We do need to add a definition and probably some specific standards for outdoor storage, but this would generally be outdoor storage related to businesses, such as rental businesses, contractors that might store equipment or materials outside, and like lumber yards, those sorts of things, right? So we just need to, I guess, discuss where we want those in our districts, and then when we get to the specific use standards later on in the zoning regulations, we can add additional sidebars to outside storage, such as screening requirements, where they have to be located, like, side or rear of the building, those sorts of things. So I'll open it up for discussion.
Why does this have to have its own little header instead of just including it in the permitted uses section? I'm kind of,
I think we had talked about moving it down as opposed to having it up above, because it was something that would be complementary to like retail space or rental space or auto space. Does that make sense? I remember us moving it
Yeah,
down.
because we had that discussion. We had that discussion because it's really accessory to a primary use. So that the table up above is intended to be primary uses of property, and principal uses. And then outdoor storage is meant to be kind of accessory to that, because you don't want a lot that just is outdoor storage. I think you want that to be accessory to a principal use, such as a contractor shop or a lumber yard, or like some kind of business that has some sort of outdoor storage component to it.
so clearly defined as accessory to the primary use.
That's what accessory is. Yeah, it's accessory to a principal use. So you can't have. So for instance, somebody can't come and say, "I own a lot on Broadway. I don't want to put a building on it. I just want it for outdoor storage." And we would say, "No, you can't." Based on this, we'd say, "No, you can't do that. You have to have a principal structure or use to go along with that. You can't just have outdoor storage."
Um, yeah, a question on that also, we talked about it before, but not quite in the same way. Um, obviously, residential is not C3N, but do we have any way to approach outdoor storage in a residential area when there's no screening or anything about it? Is there a way we can say no on that one? Can it be specifically mentioned? And it might take a better definition of what outdoor storage is too.
I think that's a big part of it, the definition, because again, to me, I don't have an issue if someone owns a lot that wants to store things outside if they make it look nice.
But I think that's the key.
Yeah.
That there are, I mean, just around the corner, I know there's a business located on Platte that recently built a structure on the back, and now there's, multiple skid steers, a lot of other equipment stored around, well, in a residential area would normally be your yard, but this is now filled with equipment that they use in their business. And I think it's almost right behind you, but it's blocked down towards the north. So, yeah, I mean, do we want the people to run their business out of their home? I guess I don't have an issue with that. I guess it can get to be really ugly as far as, then I'll have to throw in on top of that, what about Boyd's Garage?
Yeah.
Not that Boyd's Garage is a bad thing, but they store a lot of cars around that, and we have the auto repair shop on Broadway that backs up to Broadway, and that there's quite often storage in there, and that's, it's all an ancillary use. And then you also have Red Lodge Hardware, Ace Hardware, which that's a desirable thing, but they part of the year they do a lot of outdoor storage there. And even the grocery store has a lot of outdoor storage in the backside. So I guess it depends on how we want to parse this down. You said it. I think the key is, how do we define this? What do we?
Yeah, again, I think that I have and I say it every week, I have no issue with what you do on your property as long as you look good doing it.
Well, I think right now C3 North is over limiting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I just don't want to, I don't have issue with folks doing that stuff as long as they have a clear expectation of it looks nice and it's not a nuisance or a hazard.
What if it doesn't look nice and it isn't?
And that's how we have the definition, to make sure that but again, defining that's going to be the hard part because it's very subjective.
This is what I would say, that this is intended for business purposes. So this is like you said, the grocery store that has an outside storage component for, say, maybe they're selling plants or something like that, where they're storing materials on the side of their building or at the rear in some kind of a fenced off area to protect that. This is intended for that, or for that small contractor that has equipment that they're storing, that we want to screen that from adjacent properties. This is not necessarily intended for a single family lot and storage of their personal property. That becomes very hard to enforce. It's like, so think of zoning as zoning is a use and structure regulation that people have to follow when they build something. So if they're, it doesn't necessarily regulate how people take care of their personal property. Does that make sense? So there's other ordinances that actually deal with community decay and taking care of your property and keeping your property in order, right? That's not intended for zoning. So that I want to make that distinction that, we could, if you want to, under outdoor storage, we could put some sidebars in the outdoor storage section that talks about, that we can try to do some things where, if people are storing things on their property, it has to be screened or has to be to the rear of their property. The problem is if it's not a permanent structure, it's really hard for us to enforce. That's where those other community decay ordinances come into play, because we're really dealing in zoning with uses and structures, right? And so if they're not building something, how do we, it just takes a lot of effort on the city's part to try to enforce that regulation versus, a decay ordinance or something. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
thank you.
So that's why on this, I want you to focus on, this is like larger business type uses, or maybe it's that home occupation with a contractor in C1 or something, where they have just a very small business and they have a skidster and a dump truck or a dump trailer. I think we could put sidebars on things like that, where if it's a business related activity and they're storing equipment or materials, it has to be screened, right, from adjacent property. That's what I want you to focus on. And then in the C3N, C3S, outdoor storage for lumberyard, hardware store, rental place, like equipment rental places. A lot of times you'll have a building for where they have equipment inside, but then their larger equipment is outside in some kind of a yard or outdoor storage area, right?
Why would we have to control commercial outside storage? I mean, I don't understand.
I think it's a screening issue, right? And it's screening and location, right? So I think you don't want to necessarily have outdoor storage in the front of a principal building, right? You want the principal building to be facing your main road, right? And you want that kind of unobstructed. You don't want a big fence with a secure outdoor storage area in that front space. So we want to regulate it to where it's on the side or the rear. We want to screen that from adjacent residential uses, not necessarily adjacent commercial uses, but if they're adjacent to residential uses, we want that area screened, right?
And
I'm
not sure I agree with that.
I'm right there with you, Sandy.
If we have, if their business is U-Haul, they're gonna want the U-Hauls lined up in front. It's part of their advertising. If the hardware store is selling their nursery items, the flowers and all that, they're gonna want it in the front, not hidden behind a screen. These are commercial outdoor storage, and I don't think that we should be regulating it at all.
Thank you. Agreed.
And that's why we're having this conversation.
I don't disagree, Sandy, but not all outdoor storage is inventory that's going to be available. I think you get into a different issue when you have equipment that doesn't necessarily need to be visible from the street. And I guess I also have to go back to C3 North. I mean, that was the whole issue. That is the whole issue on the north entrance, is how it looks, appearance. And that's the one thing that in the community survey people wanted most, is they wanted screening along Broadway So they didn't have to look at AY Supply, so they didn't have to look at Kroll, so they don't have to look at ProCut, so they don't have to look at the storage yards at Mead. If you're trying to make your city entrance into something that's more attractive than that, then I think there's kind of a fine line, and I guess it depends on what's being displayed. But that was, again, that's what the community told us.
Yes and no. I don't think, I think you're breaking it down a little bit more specific than what the community said. They wanted it to be more attractive, but I don't think they necessarily said they want more screening.
Well, screening can be anything from bushes to trees to,
Right. So
and we already require every business on Broadway, they're supposed to have their garbage can screened in the alley. Who sees those? So it's kind of weird that we want to differentiate on something like that. We get, either we want to be nitpicky or we don't want to be nitpicky, I guess, so.
We also have a growth policy that says that we're gonna have zero frontage, reverse frontage on our community entrances
North,
and south.
yeah.
So that basically says they're gonna have, our buildings are gonna be shifted towards the front with a 10-foot setback.
So they couldn't have their
And
inventory.
all the parking is supposed to be in the back.
Or the side.
Huh?
Or the side.
Or the side, yeah.
Right.
But not fronting Broadway, so that would keep that in mind as well, in terms of, so if another lumber company wanted to build something in the community entrance zone, we would request that their building be shifted to the front and all their storage be to the back or to the side. That's currently what's in our growth policy. That's
Right.
currently kind of the way we've been approaching that, so.
I think that the trouble that we're having is outdoor storage. It depends on what the purpose of it is. If the outdoor storage is part of their business that they're selling or renting or whatever, is different from the little kiosk in the back where they have all of their big heavy-duty equipment that they use, that's not for sale and it's not for rent in the front. I think those are two different animals.
And I will disagree on that too, because part of that is also advertising. Because you're gonna have certain contractors, think about most of the contractors in town that own their own equipment, their names are strapped right there on the side. That's marketing for them. Same with, back when Pizza Co. used to do delivery, they had the delivery Jeeps, and that was one of their conversations, was parking it around town for free advertising. And so specifically, you think about some of that equipment, if I know that, that guy has the equipment we need to be able to put a hot tub on a second-story deck, that's who I'm calling. And so there is that level of advertising for that business. And so that's my only pushback on that.
So I guess the question is, just to kind of hopefully move this along a little bit, the question is, do we want to address outdoor storage or not? Meaning, do we even want this in the accessory use table? And if so, we can then put outdoor storage, we can put sidebars on that in the specific use standards, and we could put exceptions in there, say, moving rental vans, landscaping or not maybe landscaping, but like, what am I thinking of? Like flowers, I can't think of the word for it right now, but, we could put exceptions to the outdoor storage requirement. The intent, and we can add the intent to it, is the intent is to screen, contractor equipment, rental equipment, bulk storage of lumber, or something, we can be very specific in the use standards section, and we can make exceptions.
So what are you recommending through Well, right off, I'm gonna assume that we're not gonna allow outdoor storage in any of the residential areas, correct? That's commercial business versus.
I would agree with that. I would say all your residential, I would say no, and then I would say in your commercial, since it's accessory, I would just make it permitted in your commercial areas. On P1 and P2, I would say that depends on if you see any reason. I would probably make it permitted on P1 and P2 because I could see, the county or the city, potentially wanting to do outdoor storage of, equipment or something on government or school, right? To do some outdoor storage of materials or equipment. And then, like I said, in the specific use standards, we just set the sidebars and the exceptions for what it is.
So we would have, conditional use in C1, C2, C3, and C3.
I would just
Yes.
make it permitted. I would make it permitted, not conditional. But that,
The exception I would make would be for C1, because that's mixed residential on Broadway.
yeah, I mean, it's up to you guys. I mean, we can make it conditional in C1 and then the rest
Well,
of it.
I would say not permitted in C1.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, that works too.
And see, I'm leaning towards not regulating at all.
Yeah. With you.
I mean, the guy who, owns this house over here with his big garage and his equipment, it's his lot. I'm sorry, if he has his skidster there, okay. It's not in the alley, it's not on the public street, it's in his lot.
Yep.
I
His
mean,
property.
so the residential, I'm completely out of it. And the commercial, I can't see why we need to regulate it. I just can't see why we need to regulate it.
Yep. Again, end of the day, it's people doing business as they want to do business on their property. They're going to do their best to make it attractive, that fits their business and their needs.
Why do we have zoning?
Yeah. Good point.
What's the purpose? Why are we
I would
sitting here
I
going
would say
through
most
zoning regulation, and then we're gonna open this up and we're gonna
one
permit
particular-
everything everywhere?
It's one particular thing, and that's outdoor storage. And a lot of it's used temporarily, like the nursery. That's a temporary storage type of thing. And it just opens up a sticky wicket, and I am leaning towards, at least in the commercial zones, I don't know why we would regulate outdoor storage. I could see it in the residential zones if it were the primary use.
Yeah, and again, in the residential zones, if it's outdoor storage for commercial use, it doesn't make sense to have it permitted. But in the commercial areas, the outdoor storage can be permitted. Again, end of the day, people are just doing their best to get by in their commercial space.
And maybe it should say outdoor storage for commercial use.
Well, I would agree with that.
Perhaps that at least, sits better with me for commercial use, because then we wouldn't be addressing the residential uses.
Yeah.
But again, I don't want the businesses to have to say, oh gee, I can't put that out there because it's being regulated,
Yeah.
Sorry, the nursery can't go out there, or, whatever they've got going.
I don't think that's the intent of outdoor storage. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, if a business, on Broadway, they put merchandise out on the street all the time. That's not an issue.
Storage, like, yeah.
That's not an issue.
Storage, it's not storage.
So I would say the same thing with a nursery or whatever. In the case of the lumberyard and even, well, I guess Ace Hardware or True Value has their outdoor stuff during the season. I don't have any issue with that
Yeah.
either.
And
So-
U-Haul?
Well, that's a little bit different.
section of city.
especially in our community entrance. I think on our community entrance, the intent is to utilize that space, you know, for, if somebody wanted to have a U-Haul business, the building associated with administering that business would be facing Broadway. The storage of the vans and the trailers would be towards the back of the property. I mean, that's kind of the way.
Billings has 2 U-Hauls, and they're both street fronted, and their equipment's all behind the building.
Right.
Or off to the side. It's not on the street.
You know, keep in mind what our growth policy says, and keep in mind, as Perry said, what the community has told us in terms of what their desirability is for our community entrances. Those are the things that we need to keep in mind as we go through reviewing these zoning regulations. And sometimes I think when we try to piecemeal it out, kind of lose sight of the bigger picture. So that's all I'm trying to say.
Well, and I think we'll come back to this when we get to the specific use standards section, because we'll add outdoor storage in there, and then we can talk about more, we can dial it in more specifically, right, on what the intent is, what the definition is, what the requirements are, what the exceptions are, right? That's where we get into those specifics. But I agree, the intent is not to regulate, that business that's putting out flowers in front of their building to sell to the public. That's not the intent. The intent is large outdoor storage areas like lumber yards and rental equipment and, or contractor who has a yard for materials and equipment, things that you don't necessarily want to see from the road or from a residential adjacent property, huge stacks of lumber, right? Or lined up equipment that's sitting there. Those are the things that we're thinking of, not small greenhouses and things like that. So we can dial that in that specific use standard. And I think that it's important because, most communities do some sort of regulation of outdoor storage. Just in some cases, and think about it from the aspect of you're trying to think of those nuisance activities that could be a potential, right? So you're trying to get ahead of things before they come, so that you're not dealing with, if you don't do it at all and somebody comes and says, I'm going to put in a huge storage yard and I don't care about security or anything like that. I'm just going to park a ton of equipment on this lot and storage of materials on it, and it's going to be right next to the highway, right? You have no way to regulate that because you didn't put it anywhere.
But this says accessory land use, not primary.
Okay, so they build a 2,000 square foot shop, and then the rest of the lot is outdoor storage right next to the highway.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is mesh what we've said in our growth policy, what the public has told us about how they would like our community entrances to appear. And ever since I've been on this board, the direction has been to make our community entrances attractive and welcoming, not to have a reverse frontage, so we don't have these large expanses of blacktop in front and facing 212, that all of that is shifted to the back and screened by the building. And so I'm sort of hearing from the board that they want to completely change that direction.
No, we're not talking about that. at all.
I'm not talking about changing that direction. Again, still want it to be attractive, fine with the back, like having the facing up in the front, fine with having streets in the back. I'm just saying if they want to put storage containers back there, they can. That's what I'm saying is, again, I think that we can come to a compromise to where it can be an attractive entrance, but I also just want to be careful with how we interpret what was being said and with the getting too narrow scopes for how that front entrance can be, because we don't want to eliminate essential businesses.
So,
Just because they're not pretty to some, it's too subjective, so we gotta be careful.
so that's my concern as well, is that if we say it's permitted, then how do we put the sideboards on that versus, I mean,
Well, so
that's the thing that I'm struggling with. You can end up with a zoning regulation that spells all the detail out, and all of a sudden you're dealing with 150-page document because you gotta be so specific and so, versus if it's conditional uses with sideboards, you have the opportunity to review what the proposal is, put conditions of use on that proposed use. So that's what I'm struggling with.
And I agree with that to a point, but then again, I don't think that other businesses such as, Ace needs to come to us for a conditional use permit to put out their flowers or, you know, any,
We're not.
I don't want to go crazy with the conditional use.
I don't think that's the intent, though.
And I think to broaden on this a little bit is, so, to us, the conditional use may seem very approachable. It's $500 out of the business owner's pocket. It's more time and energy from city staff. It makes it very difficult for people to conduct normal business when they're already struggling. And with that, I think it's also not necessarily fair to be able to just throw conditions on by a board that could change or be subjective. I think that it's fair that we have clear expectations within the zoning code. I'd rather have a 150-page document that's clear and it has clear expectations set than have people feeling it's vague and not knowing what to expect and putting money down hoping that they're going to get something passed.
Well,
This section isn't gonna be a big section. I mean, what I've seen in most zoning codes is it's a fairly short section that provides a definition / intent of the section, for outdoor storage, and then it goes into, and usually, like I said, when there's usually just a couple of requirements. It has to be on the side of the building or the rear of the building. It has to be screened from a residential use with a wall or a fence or landscaping, right? We talk about, but that's about all you're going to do. Like, is you're just going to screen it from residential uses, right? So, I mean, it's not going to be a long section. And then we can throw some of those exceptions in there, like we talked about it, to make sure that we're not, overusing it or trying to get, too specific as far as like just, minor things like flowers and stuff, right? But
Temporary outdoor storage.
So I started to say, I guess we kind of have to look at existing use. I mean, that's not what our intent is. But you have to ask yourself, how did we get to where we are with existing use? So a good example is the cannery and the area behind the cannery, which Roxy uses for outdoor storage when he's building an art installation. But there's nothing in C2 that says he can do that currently.
Right.
His whole project, there's nothing in C2 that says he can do that. And that's so yeah, we're kind of creating we don't want to create a large riddle that nobody can figure out. And and I think right now in C3 North, they couldn't build a facility with outdoor storage that borders Broadway. It's just not possible. Everything has to front the other direction.
Yeah.
And so I think it's kind of a moot point there, but C3 North, C3 South, that whole area down by Crazy Creek, that somebody wanted to put a business there. Like we have a True Value as opposed to an Ace, they're gonna, I'm not sure how we would require them to sit that on the site.
Well, it's not been an issue with when the lumberyard came before the planning board, and it was where they were storing their materials wasn't an issue. I mean, that, of course, they were set back.
They're set back,
They're
right.
set back from Broadway. It's never, when it's an ancillary use to a primary business, I don't recall where they have their outdoor storage has ever been really an issue.
It hasn't been, that's why we were both saying, do we really need it? Because it hasn't been an issue. Because it's not good for business. I mean, that's the bottom line, is if they, put all their junk in front of their building, then,
They're gonna look like a building with a bunch of junk.
yeah, so.
Maybe that's their business.
I mean, honestly, I thought AY Supply was a dump when I first moved to town, and I tried to take a picnic table from there, and then someone came out of the shack, and it's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm taking this. I'm like, that's not yours. I thought this was a dump. Sorry.
Now that's funny.
And I bought it for $10, so I'm like, is it for sale?
So suddenly it's okay.
Well, shall we move on then?
Yeah, because-
I guess one thing I'll add, if I can, so in your current zoning, the only place we reference outdoor storage, and this is where this came up originally because it was in the primary use table, is it's only allowed currently as a conditional use in the C3N. None of the other districts mention outdoor storage at all, except for C3N. And the definition in the back of the regulations is outdoor storage, the keeping, stockpiling, or storing of materials for any reason in the outdoors. That's a very broad definition. So I just want to point that out, that you currently only regulate it in C3N, and because it's not listed in any other district, I technically don't think we could really allow it as a use in any of the other districts now, except for C3N as a conditional use. So if somebody came in today and had a business in C3S, and that business proposed outdoor storage that was in line with this definition, we would have to tell them probably no, because it's not listed as a use. So I want to point that out, that this is a good discussion, because I think that might be some confusion in the current regulations, and maybe not the intent of the city to not, allow outdoor storage in those other districts.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that clarification, but I kind of want to go back to something. When you first defined outdoor storage, we're talking about something that's not the normal business of the operation, or are we talking about, because if it's ancillary or side storage, as opposed to, like, let's say for Ace Hardware, when they set up stuff out in their parking lot, that's for retail sale. It's not for storage per se.
Correct. No, I'm talking, that's why I want to move this to accessory and allow it in other districts, because the intent is not for, Ace Hardware parking some lawnmowers out in front of their building. The intent is for storage of, large like a lumberyard. Like, I'm going to keep going back to lumberyard, right? Where you have a lot of stockpiled materials, or you have a rental business that has a ton of equipment, right? That is being stored, and most of those places are going to want to secure it behind a fence anyways. They're not going to have it out. Typically, they're not going to have them out large quantities of that stuff, they're not going to have it out for anybody to access. They're going to have it in a fence so that they can lock it at night and open it up during the day, right? So I think we're talking mostly about just screening and where do we want those things placed on a lot, right? But no, we're not talking about retail type, like I said, Ace Hardware parking some lawnmowers out in front of their store so they can sell them to the public. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about large scale storage.
Question. So wasn't there a request recently to put a storage container at Ace Hardware or True Value? I can't remember which.
Ace.
Would that be considered an accessory structure, or would that be considered a storage? Because it's like the big shipping container, right, for storage?
That's a structure. That's not what we're talking about
Does that
here is
mean-
outdoor air storage.
Okay. Okay.
Like this is like not covered storage,
Maybe
no
like a car
structure.
Or
Yeah, it's like
the
basically like a
front
parking
side
lot.
door.
Yeah, I mean, it's a storage
Oh.
container. I view that as a structure. So I would treat that like a shed or a garage or something like that, right? That's not what we're talking, because that's enclosed already. So whatever you put in it is already screened. So we just review that as a structure, an accessory structure. If we allow it.
Why don't you put together something, and let's look at this again,
Yeah.
put,
Well,
what other people done or
yeah, we'll look-
whatever, and you had said
Yeah, we'll
earlier.
look at it again anyways when we get to the specific use standards section, right? I mean, and that's kind of what I anticipate is, for now, let's leave the table as we have it, permitted in these districts. And then when we get to the specific use standard section, we can always come, we're going to be back at these tables for another pass through. So once we review that specific use section for outdoor storage, then we can revisit the table and see if we want to change this to permitted, conditional, whatever.
Sounds good.
All right, the next one. Now the next three, I basically just took right out of the current regulations, except accessory dwelling units. I did make some changes to that, but the home occupations and accessory structures, this is set up just like you currently have it. So home occupations are permitted in all the districts except for P1 and P2. And then accessory structures, these are sheds, garages, those types of things are permitted in all the districts. So I'm not proposing any changes to those. And we have specific standards in the specific use standards section on home occupations. So we'll visit that when we get to that section on what those, if you want to make any changes to those specific use standards. And as far as accessory dwelling units go, basically I just changed this to be in line with the table, the land use table up above, because starting in R2, we already allow 2 dwelling units, and then on through the rest of the districts, and including conditional use for other other uses or other dwelling units. So we don't need to have accessory dwelling units in any of the other districts except for R1. If we have it in the other districts, then what we've run into is what we've run into recently, right, is an issue where the district allows for 2 dwelling units, but then it also says under accessory uses that you can have an ADU. So does that mean we have to allow 2 dwelling units plus an ADU? And I don't think that was the intent of the zoning, was to allow 3 dwelling units on a lot in say that district. And so what I tried to do here was say, okay, well, anything R2 and above, we allow 2 units or more. So we don't need ADUs in those districts. The only district we need an ADU requirement is in R1, and that's mainly because state law now requires us to we can't exclude ADUs based on state law. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was an issue that I think came up earlier this year about the interpretation of ADUs versus duplexes. So this kind of resolves that conflict.
And that, yep, and that was my intent, was to kind of resolve that issue that we came up with earlier, or in 2025, that we talked about. And again, align us with state law requirements, right? So all the other districts, we already allow 2 units or more, so we don't have to have an ADU requirement in those districts. But R1, because we only allow single family residential in R1, then we have to allow for accessory dwelling unit.
Got it.
So any changes that anybody wants to make to those 3 items, or are we good with what we got?
I think we're
I think we're good.
okay.
We're good.
How are you, John? You still there?
Okay, so I think we're on to dimensional standards. Now I didn't make a lot of changes or suggestions to this. I do have, so one thing I did do on the first 2, we did have in some of the districts, in R2, R3, and R4, we had dwelling unit lot area per unit above the first dwelling unit. So basically, we start with 5,000 square feet for 1 dwelling unit, and then anything above 1 dwelling unit, you have to add on another 1,250 square feet to the lot area for each additional dwelling unit. So rather than having that spelled out in each district standard down below, I just moved that up to this table, so it's all in one spot. So first dwelling unit lot area is unchanged. I didn't change any of that from what's in the current zoning. And then I added a second row that says for after first dwelling unit lot area per unit, minimum square feet. And then in R2, R3, and R4, 1,250 per unit additional lot area.
Okay, I see R2 for the lot area, minimum square feet as,
5,000.
yeah, the old table said 500.
Well, there's a 0 below it, I think.
Oh, is that what that 0
I
is?
think that's because they narrowed the column and it.
Okay,
it just-
I feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a
The other one
typo.
was 10,000.
Yep. And then,
Okay.
so I'm just going to go through these a little bit, and then we can jump back and start discussion on this. The third thing was lot coverage. Right now, you don't specify any required lot coverages in any of the districts. And again, so lot coverage is what percentage of the lot can you cover with the structure, with structures. And so, obviously we have our setback requirements, so you can't have anything in a setback. And so again, it's completely up to you guys. I just want to bring it up, that, do you want any additional so essentially the way it's written right now, as long as you meet setback requirements, you can cover the entire rest of the lot with structures. Right. So there's no, it's basically your setbacks are your yards. So if somebody wanted to build a house and completely fill the remaining portion of the lot, they could do so as long as they meet setback requirements. That's fine if that's what you want, but I want to point it out. A lot of times what we see in, especially in low density residential districts, so like R1 in particular, is we usually see a 40 to 60% lot coverage requirement, where they can't cover a lot with more than 40 to 60%. And again, it's up to you. I've seen 75%, I've seen, 70, 80, or you can leave it as is. I just want to throw it out there, open it up for discussion. That's all my intent here, is I'm not advocating one way or another. Sure. On the higher density districts, especially commercial and residential higher density stuff, we do typically see no lot coverage requirements, because you're getting into, people putting in, higher density residential buildings and apartments and that sort of thing. So, and then lastly, under building height, the only thing I want to mention is that the legislature did pass a law last session that in commercial and industrial zones, building heights can't be restricted to less than 60 feet. I'll caveat that with that's for cities with a population over 5,000 people. Red Lodge does not meet that threshold, so you're not required to meet that requirement of the law. But I want to point it out, and just for conversation's sake, that is law. It may change in the future to trickle down to smaller cities. It just depends on the legislature, right? The intent is obviously higher density to help with housing in across the state in allowing for multifamily units in commercial areas with more height and less restrictions on heights, right? So that's the intent of the legislature in that law. Again, it doesn't apply to Red Lodge. You're not over 5,000 people. I just want to point it out that is out there, and just for conversation's sake. So with that, huh?
60? 60?
Yeah.
60. Yep. You can't if you're a population over 5,000 people, the law now says you cannot restrict building heights less than 60 feet. So you have to essentially. Huh?
Did I see something in the state about minimum lot sizes that, like, we have a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet? Did I see something about 3,750, or is that just something that was discussed?
I think we need to talk.
I don't recall that one, anything passing with a lot size restriction.
Okay.
I can look and double check, but I don't recall seeing anything with that requirement from the last legislature.
Okay.
So anyway, with that, I will open this table up for discussion. I just wanted to cover those things before we get started. So I guess let's just start with the first line. And are we comfortable with these minimum lot sizes? Obviously, we're talking mostly about residential, because your commercial districts, you don't have a required minimum lot size.
I guess I just have to bring up to the group, especially R3, there's a lot of lots that aren't 5,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And if the house was to burn down, get torn down, what have you, does that mean they?
I've heard some horror stories from folks that have had half-size lots that, wanted to expand on it and build, and being told they can't because of the size.
Right, and I happen to own a lot that's less than 5,000.
Get out of here, Perry. Your lot's worthless.
And we do have lots in town that, according to this table, they're unbuildable.
Right.
Yeah.
And the
We
question,
have empty lots that are,
empty lots that are unbuildable.
yeah.
Well, and
And
we can talk about that some more in the non-conforming section of the zoning, because there's a section on non-conforming lots, and typically what we see is if a lot is non-conforming, we can't prevent somebody from building on an existing lot, right? So if the lot exists, but we can restrict what they build or how they build. But so most of the time what we see is if a lot doesn't meet the minimum lot size requirements, it's considered a non-conforming lot, and typically we can allow single family residential as long as it meets the setback requirements, or the setback requirements are reduced to the I can't remember how it's worded, least amount possible to make the lot buildable or something like that. That's kind of what we typically see as sidebars for that. And I've dealt with those quite a bit in other communities. And typically we're able to allow people to build on those. Now I have read through Red Lodge's non-conforming lots section, because we haven't had to deal with that, I don't think, for a while, but we can visit those requirements when we get to that section, if that makes sense. And think about this too. So don't think about it just from the sense of what is existing in the city now. These also are used if somebody comes in and subdivides a piece of property.
Right, right.
Right? So we want minimum, you want to be able to set that minimum, because a subdivision has to be done in compliance with zoning. So you got to think about it from that perspective, not just what is existing.
We don't
And
want them to create.
There's other processes like variances and stuff too, right? So what we see a lot of times is if somebody's house burns down or garage burns down, and they end up going through the variance process to get an approval for reestablishing that structure or use. And I have never seen one denied a variance to reestablish something that was destroyed by a fire or something.
That particular, especially Fentown, there's a lot of lots that are
Oh, yeah.
under 5,000, and there's a lot of setbacks that are side setbacks that are 3 feet or less.
You can have
Existing.
high between the windows.
We just don't want to create those.
No, we don't want to create new, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, don't want to create new, but in R4, would it hurt to actually create new, smaller lots if it does mean you're making an affordable home that's a small one-bedroom house for somebody that's purchasable? Like, I think about what's that one on 17th, it's like 513 and a half or whatever. I mean, those types of properties do have a benefit for the working classes in the community.
Well, they don't have to. They could call it a townhome. They don't have to
That's true.
split the land.
That's true.
It's splitting the land, I think, is the
The
issue.
issue.
Well, just to throw it out there, we're looking to try to build affordable housing. Maybe we should look at 3750. I mean, what if somebody wanted to do a tiny home or a
Yeah.
smaller home subdivision, 500 square feet or?
Yeah, I mean, and again, Sandy has a point in the fact that you can do it condos or like townhomes, to
And-
where
And still sell them
and you
individually.
can sell them individually still.
They just don't have title to the
The
land.
land itself.
Yeah,
That's community property.
yeah.
So it's just a thought, like, if we're trying to incentivize affordable housing, that's, because, I mean, it might be one of those things where I'd really like to have the lot because I want to do a vegetable garden. Like, you see that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know,
Yeah.
just something to consider.
Yeah, I don't think I want to reduce the size of the lot here, that we do have non-conforming lots, and we can deal with those at a different time.
I'm fine with that, yeah, I was just throwing it out.
Because right now, we're platted at 6250. So lots are supposed to be 50 by 125 traditionally. So 5,000 is less than the original plat
That's
size.
true. No, if you go back to the original, it was unplatted.
Yeah, it was just one.
You should see my property line in one of my houses.
Oh, that I'm sure, yeah.
Chelsea, you bring up a good point in R4 though, and I guess I'm thinking about in Bozeman, next to the interstate, past the 7th Avenue exit, if you look off to the
Mhm.
north,
Right,
there's this little tiny home development. Now, maybe those aren't individual lots. Maybe they're just kind of, but
Community
Having the-
property.
having the flexibility to develop something like that, or smaller square footage homes that still have a yard associated with them. That's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm
So-
sort of thinking about, not just focusing on a townhome kind of.
Yeah.
I think Sandy had a good point there.
What, go ahead, Jeremy.
So I will say that, if a developer wants to propose something different, they have the ability to do that through the plan unit development process. So if somebody's doing a subdivision, and I just reviewed one in East Helena, where they proposed a plan unit development that included small, like we're talking 2,500 square foot, 3,000 square foot lots. It was actually Habitat for Humanity. Is actually subdividing, doing a very large 300 lot subdivision in East Helena. And they want, just exactly what you're talking about. They want small, narrow lots for small homes, or, like cottage style homes or townhomes types construction. And East Helena zoning did not really allow for that. So they went through the plan unit development process, which basically essentially I think some of you guys understand that with the Spires project, right? They basically
Right.
have essentially their own zoning district, right? That has their own minimum lot sizes, uses, all those setback requirements that they want for their development. So I just wanted to point that out, that process is out there. So just because we say 5,000 square feet in the zoning doesn't necessarily mean there's not another process that they can go through if somebody wants something different.
And that's the PUD process?
Correct. That's the PUD process.
Because the PUD gets its own zoning, that kind of strikes me about the same as an HOA.
No, an HOA is private. The city cannot govern HOAs or covenants. A planned unit development, essentially, it's what you do is when you go through the subdivision review process, you actually go through the zoning map and zoning text amendment process at the same time, and you add they create their own district standards. Like you have residential district standards, right? They would have their own PUD district standards that would outline their minimum lot sizes, their setback requirements, their building, their height requirements, blah, 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 right? Any uses that they want. That way the city can, once that subdivision is platted and ready to build on, now the city can review development on those lots. We cannot enforce covenants. So, if they don't go through that process and they zone their subdivision R4, then we have to follow what's in our zoning. We can't enforce covenants.
So that's pretty similar to what Spires.
We
Right,
have it
it's
in the
the
back,
thing that
the
Spires
PUD,
did.
okay.
So is there any discussion on that, the square footage?
The only other piece, and I'm sure we're gonna get into it, is the additional after the first dwelling unit. And maybe R4 can come down from $12.50 per unit there, because now you're an 8,000 square foot lot for 3 units. That's pretty, I feel like that's a little contradictory to the purpose. So that would be my suggestion, is we bring those square footages down.
Oh.
Yeah, because again, if you're doing that per unit and you want a fourplex, that means you need a 10,000 square foot lot.
There aren't a lot of those in R4.
Not a lot of those, period. So, I would almost eliminate that for R4 and R3, keep it for R1 and R2.
So what you're saying is a duplex, the minimum size of the lot would be 5,000 square foot, for instance, in R2. But if you wanted to add a third unit,
Well, no,
then the lot would have to be
because based off how we have dwelling units,
6,250.
you'd have a 1-bedroom in R2 with 5,000 square foot. If you wanted to do a duplex, it'd have to be 6,250.
Oh, it says after first. I was thinking it
Yeah.
was after second dwelling unit.
Yeah. So that would be.
Which is our standard lot. So that says that if you want to have a duplex or a home, a primary and an ADU, it has to be a 6,250 lot. And I don't think that's where we were going.
No, yeah, again, I just feel like it's a little contradictory. What we're trying to do is create a little more opportunity for density, specifically in R4 and R3. Again, R2, I can, the 1250 feels fine with me, because again, now that's a standard lot, you have 2 units. If you have a little bit bigger, you can have 3, okay, in R2, that makes sense to me, but in R4, I literally want them to be able to get as many on there as they can fit, because at a certain point, setbacks, height restrictions, all of that will limit what you can do, but Like, by all means, try.
Well, that's the issue with R3. I mean, in R3, this area, there's already a lot of secondary units on a much
Oh, yeah.
smaller lot.
Or like, up again, basement apartments,
So,
all of that.
Yeah, you're just basically requiring everyone that lives in R3 to apply for a variance if they want to put in an ADU or a.
Yeah.
I could
Well,
see
it-
that after the second dwelling unit, but not the first dwelling unit.
And, I mean, honestly, for the higher density, I'd say go higher density. And for the lower density, that's what that's there for. You know, you can have those more restrictive.
Well, in R3, we're allowing for duplexes, so if we've got a standard 6250 lot in R3, then the 1250 additional,
You're okay,
we're
Yeah.
okay.
but that's only in a 6250 lot.
Which, yeah, as you said, this whole block is hit or miss if you're hitting that 6250.
So I think what I'm hearing is on the first line, we want to change that to dwelling units or lots or up to 2 dwelling units lot area and leave those the same. And then on the second line, we want to say after the second dwelling unit,
I like
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
and then leave R2 and R3 as 1250, and then but put NA in the R4 column.
I like that.
Yep.
That's what I heard.
Good hearing.
I think that's where we were going.
Okay. Is that good then? Are we good to move on?
Yeah.
Perry?
Well, it says, in the first line, it says second dwelling unit lot area, and then after, okay, all right, I understand the language.
Yeah,
Good
we'll
to
play
move.
with that, make sure. I think set first and second dwelling unit lot. There we go. Let's
Okay.
do something just to make it more clear. But yeah, that was the intent. So,
Don't forget.
all right, on lot coverage, do we want to talk
Yeah,
lot coverage?
wait, we've been forgetting about John.
Oh,
I'm listening.
Are you okay with the way the discussion's been going?
Yeah, I would have said something.
Oh, okay.
All right. We don't see you on the screen, so I forget that you're there.
Oh, no, I'm here. But just, Dave doesn't have me up there. He doesn't like me anymore.
Hey, go ahead, Jeremy.
all right. So I think the next line is the lot coverage, which I talked about a little bit earlier. Currently, you don't have any lot coverage requirements, and again, like I said, that I'm fine with that. I don't have any issues with that. I just wanted to bring it up that a lot of times, especially in the lower density residential districts, we do see some lot coverage requirements. But again, just wanted to bring it up for conversation. If you want to leave it as is, I'm good to.
I'm good as is.
Jerry? Sue? I think we're okay so far. I've always wondered about that in R3 a little. I mean, we used to have,
It's 60%, I think.
we used to have a minimum or
Maximum.
maximum lot coverage. But we took that out several years ago.
But I think that what we did is we increased the setbacks on the side.
Yeah.
To help
6
with that. It was 3. Well, the front is kind of a variable,
Yeah.
depending on what the other houses are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I feel like that one, I've seen it anywhere from like up to 25 and 10, 0.
Basically, it's 25 or conforming with the other home.
So I think we're good.
Okay. All right. I didn't have any suggested changes or thoughts necessarily on the lot frontage or setback requirements that are in the table. I feel like you guys have probably hashed that out over several years of zoning regulation reviews and updates. So I guess I haven't heard or I can't think of any specific issues that I can think of that since we've been assisting with these setbacks necessarily. There's been some issues that Brian and I have worked with as far as the definitions of where those setbacks are, or how we determine what's the front, what's the side. That's where we just need to get into the definitions later. But that doesn't really necessarily affect this table. So I guess I'll just open it up for discussion on those lines, on whether or not there's been any issues that you know of with these setbacks, or if you want to change anything, or
I thought the rear lot line setback, that, like for a garage, we set to 0 to the alley. So when it says 10-0, what does that mean? Or 5-0?
Oh, it's on the below.
yeah.
Next page.
So that's the second footnote. It says setback without alley or right of way is the first number, and then the setback with alley or right of way is the second number.
Okay.
So I'm kind of confused, Jeremy, about the lot frontage minimum with the 50 and 75. Is that down?
Yeah, that's footnote 1. Lot frontage is less than 3 dwelling units is the 50 foot, and then more
Okay,
large or greater than 3
three.
dwelling units is 75.
Because you're going to kick it up 1250 for each additional, for the third dwelling unit.
Right.
It doesn't add up. That's.
And this is what's in the current zoning. I don't know where these numbers came from. That's history. That's Red Lodge history of how this all came about. So I don't have any of the backstory on where these numbers came from. I will say that I would say it's kind of unusual to have. I haven't seen that necessarily in the regulations I've worked in, where you have 2 separate minimum lot frontages depending on how many dwelling units you have. So if there was one thing I might suggest, it might be to just take out the 75 and leave it at 50.
Because that's your minimum.
Yeah.
And then you're going to add by 12.
They can always have more, yeah. And so that would be for R3 and R4. And then R1 could probably stay the same at 75.
Yeah.
I
That's
agree.
good. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take out on R3 and R4, we'll take out the 75, and we can actually get rid of that footnote then too. Great.
So, Jeremy, I had on the rear setback in R2 and 3 and I guess 4, when you have 0 setback with an alley, I'm not sure what our alley egress is, but if you have like backing garages where you have one garage at 0 setback and right behind it is another garage at 0 setback, it's really hard for to even egress and get in and out of your garage.
This is a common discussion point in most jurisdictions when we get to accessory units like garages off an alley. I can say that I've seen it where some places want to do garages with a 10-foot setback to allow for that driveway space. Most places in town, in existing city lots, there's not room for a 10-foot setback for a garage in a backyard.
Right.
And so I can speak to East Helena. What we did was for accessory structures, we allowed a 3-foot setback on the rear from the alley to give you a little bit more space, but it still doesn't give you a lot. And I think it comes down to each individual lot and how they want to access their property. If they feel like they can get in their garage and it's on the property line, that's kind of on them to deal with that. I think the idea here is that if you have an alley you don't really need the separation from adjacent property boundaries because you have an alley that provides you that separation. And
Right.
fire department, emergency services can get down the alley to provide, to provide that access. If you don't have an alley, then you want that separation from the rear property boundary so you don't have structures right up next to each other. So,
Right.
Yep.
I guess one of the other challenges I see is, especially with, if we're gonna put ADUs behind houses off of an alley, I mean, a lot of cities require, additional parking for the ADU, because we have, especially R3, we have a lot of lots that you couldn't get 3 or 4 vehicles on the street in front of the house unless we want to change our parking from parallel to diagonal.
A lot of people are just doing anyway.
Well, yeah, but that just creates, I'm more familiar with like the Boulder County rules, and they require every ADU to have its own parking.
To give you the history of why we went with 0 setbacks off the alley is the town is covered with these one-car garages that
They're on the
are
alley,
dilapidated.
yeah.
And they couldn't tear them down, and so they leave
Left
them
right.
rotting
Yeah.
because they couldn't do anything with them. By changing it to 0 setback, they could go ahead and rebuild it in that same position as long as they didn't increase it.
And a lot of folks are getting wise to it, to where they're having it where you pull in sideways, like
Uh-huh.
that's really a smart way to do it, or they're just using them as sheds that you access from the yard.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, I'm for the 0 setback on it, and at a certain point, live your own destiny.
Yeah.
And I think new construction, they take that into consideration on, if you're gonna try to swing into your garage,
Yeah.
then,
They do.
yeah. So the new construction, I think we're fine with. This was designed for those existing structures that we'd like to have replaced here in town. Eyesores, we call them. I think Peter Italiano gave us a whole list of photos that he went around and took of these lovely garages.
I could see him doing that.
Oh, he so did.
yeah, again, I think it's just personal preference, right? If somebody wants to build their garage further back so they have a little bit of a driveway and they have the space to do it, then they can.
Yeah.
Or if they don't, then they still have the ability to build a garage or a shed on the back of their property. Because every lot's going to be different, right? Some lots have houses that are set back further and they don't have a lot of back road, right? Some lots have the house up further, they have a big backyard. It's so variable. It's just hard to
We also
determine.
have slopes, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, like, my house is a good example of a smart function for that, where my garage is in the back, but there's the driveway that comes along the side, and that same function would work really well in town.
Yeah.
Again, I don't have a alley back
And
there.
I've actually seen a lot of garages in this situation built where the doors are not facing the alley also, where you have your driveway to, one side or the other, on the lot, and then you kind of pull in off the alley into your driveway to get into your garage. I've seen that work well as well. So you could have the wall of the garage on the property line, essentially, and then you have your doors, facing, to the side.
Perpendicular to the alley.
Right.
Yep.
And I've seen that work well.
Moving right along.
So, I think the last thing I had was just that building height question that I had. I'm not anticipating you guys want to necessarily change anything to a 60-foot height,
Oh, no.
maximum, but, I just wanted to throw it out there as a question, so.
What is our current census right now? I thought we surpassed
20
30.
It's
Oh, I don't think
22,
so.
2,257 as of the 2020 census.
Yeah.
It's probably a little more than that now, but.
Yeah, because I know.
It's only 2,800, I know.
I always use
Well, we can't
2,500
go
rounded
60,
up.
like, we're not gonna gain that, that's
No.
no little cap we'll cap the population by not having enough places for all those folks. to
How
live.
tall do you think the, pollard is? 40?
40.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm happy with the 40.
Yeah, 40's good. I'm even good with 45. I mean, that's fine.
I don't
It's not
think it gets us anything.
taller ceiling.
So the only thing I might mention is that, I mean, if R4 is meant for higher density development, you know, maybe doing a higher building height than 40 feet might be beneficial, because you might be able to get some more floors out of it, than 40 feet, but,
How many floors can you get in 40 feet?
3.
3.
3
How many
floors,
floors can you get? 45.
3.
3.
So
I
you
think
did
if you wanted to go, 4 floors, you'd want at least 50 feet to 60 feet if you want 4 floors.
And aren't there more strict building requirements when you get above 3 stories? Like
There are.
elevators or?
Yeah, and that's all part of the building code. That'd be all Brian, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely more building code issues, and that's why, I mean, we typically don't see a lot of things over 2 stories, just because when you get over 2 stories or even 3 stories, you start getting into a lot more strict building code requirements for those structures. So that's why we see a lot of 2-story fourplexes, just or even 2-story, you know, multiplexes, because when you're in 2 stories, well, first of all, if you go over 4 units in one building, you have to do fire sprinklers. So that's the first thing. That's why we see a lot of 2-story fourplexes, right? Because you don't have to do the fire sprinkler requirements, and that gets expensive. So, you know, once you get over 4 units in a building, then you have to sprinkle it. So it just increases the cost exponentially. But yeah, you're right. Anything over 3 units, I think or 3 stories, gets even more stringent in building code requirements.
So question on that then, and when the folks from Kansas State were here, they had mentioned that for it to pencil, developers generally prefer a 4-story structure. And that was a comment that was made to me during,
Right.
I think, one of the after sessions.
Well, I mean, for some of those proposals that they did, the amount of land required to do anything bigger as far as a dwelling unit required so much parking space that if you're gonna add underground parking, you know, under like first level parking and build on top of that,
Yeah.
I mean, you're right at pretty much the maximum by the time you get.
So that would just be my only pushback, is if we truly do want to encourage more development for housing and apartments and parking garage like underneath, because I mean, that solves a lot of issue. Is that something that we could get variances for, or is that something that we should actually try and zone for within R4? Or
Yeah, no, they can get a variance for height. So any of these dimensional standards, they can go through the variance process. So if you had a specific developer that came in with a plan, say in R4, and they were like, hey, we really want to do a 5-story apartment building on this parcel, you know, and they're 60 feet or whatever, then, you know, they could request a variance, and that could go through the public hearing process in the Board of Adjustment. So
I'm just curious, the difference in C3 North and C3 South, you know, one's 40, one's 35.
I think that we felt that C3 North is more of a commercial district. And the thought process at the time was, when we increased it from 30 to 40, was so that we might have some sort of service retail space on the bottom and 2 stories of apartments.
Right.
And I think also just looking at the actual geography of C3 North versus C3 South is you have a little bit more of that spread, so
Yeah.
you're not losing as much of the view shed by doing the tall buildings, because when you get down to the south side, it's all pretty tight in there. Whereas in C3 North, you can do those setbacks for height.
They're larger lots and
Yeah, that's true.
there's smaller lots on the south. That sounds like a heartbeat.
I like, yeah, and the growth policy does sort of talk to keeping that view shed
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
intact in terms of the entrances as well.
Well, we talked about this when we were meeting with Kansas State, the 40 feet on C3 North, though, if you have a 10-foot setback from Broadway, then you really have,
An alley.
yeah. And even, I mean, there's been a lot of complaints, according to Mayor Dave, about the tap room, and it's further back than 10 feet,
Yeah.
but it's just a big brown wall, so.
See, that'd be the one thing I would consider with this, though, is if you can, like, what would that distance be back to where you would be willing to go taller? Because I could see if you're pushing it back to like
Like
where
towards
the
the bench.
recycling center and the
Yeah,
bench, like,
yeah.
yeah, go tall. But if it's, like, as you get further from the road, it invariably goes up. Like, I don't know if that's something you can zone for, but that'd be neat.
And this maybe brings up the point that we're going to need to discuss at some point is how to deal with urban renewal area
Mm-hmm.
and what kind, what sort of things, adjustments we want to make there relative to zoning. So
Think they should have their own overlay?
that's kind of, yeah,
It's gonna have to be an overlay outside of all of this
yeah.
and how we deal with that.
Like,
My sense right now is not to do anything with the heights. I think going to 50 feet kind of is
Yeah.
that's gonna start dominating our skyline.
Yeah.
And
how tall is the pecan range?
that's probably.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the only reason I would consider something like that in those districts, but again, it would have to be something that's pushed back. I not right there by the highway, I think that would kill the view shed, but if you did have it kind of nestled, that could be one almost complementary to the view shed.
So the front line setback would have, if it's a 10-foot setback, this would be the maximum height.
Yeah.
If it's a 20-foot setback,
Yep.
if you wanna go to this height,
Yeah, if you're
it
more than
needs to
50
be 20 feet. In
Yeah.
other words, I think that it should be tied together with the height of the building.
Mhm.
The front setback, especially on C3 North, so that we don't have this, 3-story alley coming into the city. That's only 10 feet off of that.
Again, if there's that openness when you come in, like between the golf course and the hospital.
Even the
And
hospital.
the hospital is tall, but it's back.
Mhm.
And there is something beautiful about that space, and again, it has that mountain aesthetic that kind of brings that skyline in a little bit and draws your attention in. And honestly, for someone who is moving here with a sight for sore eyes to see a hospital first thing when you roll into town, and a big one at that, not just a little clinic.
But
Right.
that one had to get a variance for the parking in the front.
See, and I think the parking's beautiful, just that whole complex is gorgeous.
Yeah, the way it was designed was very well done.
Yeah. So again, I think that that's something worth considering in C3 North is it's a way to maximize vertical space while still being complementary to the views.
How would we deal with that, Jeremy?
Yeah, so I was gonna say, so under the district standards we're gonna go through after this table, not tonight, it doesn't look like, but once we get into C3N, we can, we could, in this table, we could put, instead of 40 feet, we could put variable under C3N, say, or varies. And then, and then we could put a footnote that says, C, whatever section it is. And then under the district standard, we could have a section that's specifically building height. And we could set out parameters like, from 0 to 10 feet, building height cannot exceed, 40 feet. 10 feet to 25 feet or 50 feet or whatever we want to set it at, you know, you can go for, you can maximum building height is 50 feet. Anywhere past 50 feet, you know, maximum building height is 60 feet, you know, something like that. I think we could set those sidebars in that district standard section.
Okay,
'Cause I think, yeah, I mean, just looking at our map, I think that would be smart to do, and it's a good way to maximize while keeping what we have.
The other thing to think about, the C3N isn't just the 212 corridor, it's also Highway 78.
Right,
Yeah.
which
So-
is really important for the view shed.
Yeah, so when we adjusted the heights, I think me and Al were a little bit reluctant, primarily because of putting up a 4-story or three-story building up on the
Yeah.
up on the
Yeah.
bench.
well, and you have height restrictions off of 78, kind of. To
Well,
the
the
east of Messiah Lutheran, that's
Well, that's a different
based on the
story.
air.
That's a different story. We
Yeah,
don't want
yeah,
to talk
that's-
about that.
No, I mean, but you have to, there's a natural height restriction because the
Yeah.
airport right through the runway.
And then,
But,
I mean,
what-
all of the Mountain View Villas is already developed, and then
Yeah.
Messiah's developed. Like, I wouldn't worry about that as much, and especially with how we write it, if we were doing 100 feet back, like that, you might be getting midway through those properties at 100 feet back, and then what's that new place that just got listed? How tall is that?
Yeah,
That's tall.
Yeah.
That's like, what, 40, that's gotta be 40, right?
yeah,
So, and again, that's in R4, so that
Mhm.
makes sense. Yeah, it's probably 40. And again, I think it looks good.
yeah.
I know that the neighbors weren't stoked at first, but now that it's finished, like, I think it is,
I don't think they're as upset.
yeah, it's pretty. Like, they did a good job. So,
Yeah.
Which building is
so-
that?
triplex right there off of, I want to say Spruce, is that Spruce Lane or Pine Drive Part 2?
How do you turn on Lower
Lower.
Continental, and right away there's, God, it's not Pine, maybe it's
I
Pine.
think it's Pine.
Well, the new-
Anyway, Pine
The
Ridge,
new 3-unit,
yeah, there are 3, it's a triplex
you're out with the garage.
with a garage
Yeah.
below, a single garage
Yeah.
below.
Yeah, I think that's so, and it might just be when we go into those specifics, we do say it's just for the 212 corridor.
Mhm.
Like, or it's just for the urban renewal overlay, and maybe
And,
these 4 lots that are in C3 North outside of that overlay. I mean, you also don't want that necessarily at Town Pump. Maybe, I don't know,
Well,
you
like,
could do it cool.
their Alpine Basin is, do we even leave that C3 North? I mean, it's there. There's nothing else that's gonna be
Yeah.
built there. Do we wanna have that possibility down the road?
well, we know we have some adjustments on this map.
Yeah.
You definitely.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a way to kind of come up with a creative solution.
Yeah, it's kind of mediating that, just enough to
Yeah, 'cause,
soften the entrance.
mhm.
And I just wrote like maybe 10 feet back, then 25 is the height, because I'm thinking 1 story.
Yeah.
And then 20 feet back, then you can go to the 40.
Mm.
But, you know, we can look at that and see what it looks like.
So under C3N then, and maybe R4, do we want it just in the table for now, put varies? And then
I
when we
like
get to
Yeah.
district standards, we'll hammer out what we want.
Yeah,
I think that's a good idea.
yeah.
I think we gotta have consensus there, Aaron.
Okay, well, that
John,
gets us through the tables.
Yeah, we haven't heard from John.
What do you think? How's it all?
He said if he disagrees, he'd say something.
Yeah.
I'm shaking my head.
Okay, well, I think that with that, I don't think we have much time to really get into the, anything else, so let's save, getting into the district-specific standard stuff for the next meeting.
Cool.
sounds good. So, Next item on the agenda is any public comment again. Anybody online?
You have no one online now.
We lost the one.
Scared them off.
And there's nobody in the room, so written correspondence and staff communication?
We're setting up a pre-app for a design review at 424 Broadway. Looks like just a garage.
What's that?
Looks like a garage expansion to a commercial shop or something. We have a pre-app. We'll schedule in the next couple of weeks and then
Where's that?
424 Broadway?
South
Oh.
or north?
424 North Broadway.
North Broadway. Oh, I think, is that Vicki Elfring's old place?
Oh.
Old Moonlight Market?
Yeah, right, that's about right.
Well, it's 4 blocks north of here because this is 11th is the.
Right.
Just look it up.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but other than that,
And what's it for?
A garage?
they want to add a garage onto the existing structures.
Oh,
Yeah, it's old Elfring Accounting.
ah,
The old what?
Elfring Accounting.
Which was,
So it's Moonlight Market's little green
Yeah.
place with the parking on the side.
it's where Samurai Sue's was.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's had quite a few typos.
Been through the ringer. Cute spot.
All
Did it
right.
finally sell? Must have.
Must have. Or it's been taken off the market, but
Or,
it's been foreclosed.
or it's pending or contingent or something.
Sold. It's sold. I'm gonna bet it was sold.
Maybe it's pending our approval of what they want to do.
That's what I would do if it was important to me. They already have quite a bit on that lot.
Anything else from anybody? All right, we're adjourned.
Yay, thank you.
Hi, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.